I wish I had my Stand with Black Women button on now, Sandra.
Where's your t-shirt?
All right.
I wish I had my Stand with Black Women button on
Here we
now,
go.
Sandra.
Okay, it looks like we are streaming live. First of all, I'd like to welcome each of you to this Women's History Month celebration conversation. Thank you for joining me. My name is Khalil Sarin. I am the Vice President of Cleveland Heights City Council, and I am hosting this event because I think that, of course, it is important to hear women's voices year round. But since we're in Women's History Month right now, I thought it was a good idea to have a showcase that would, focus even more specifically right now. This, of course, is not the last time that we can do something like this, or that we should do something like this. We should be doing this all the time. I'd like to introduce our participants today. I'll start with our students, our CHUH students. Zelda, welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to give you some time to introduce yourself. Abby, also thank you for joining us. With us, we have State Senator Sandra Williams. We've got CHUH School Board member Malia Lewis, and our state rep, Janine Boyd. And I just want to say, specifically Janine, she has challenged me to raise the bar, to push myself. Her thoughtfulness and compassion and patience has set an example for public service for me that I hope to live up to. She is the inspiration for these events that I've held, and I'm honored that she accepted my invitation to join us today. I'd like for each of you to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about you that you think is important for the viewers to know. We'll start with Zelda, if you'd like to tell us about you.
Hi, I'm Zelda Thayer Hansen. I'm a senior at Cleveland Heights High School. I have lived in the Heights for my entire life, went through Noble Boulevard and then Monty. I'm an artist. I work a lot in mixed media. I have an internship at Heights Arts Gallery, so I love working with artists in the community, and actually like curating a lot of different people's pieces and showing it to the community. And I'm also working with Safer Heights, the local Black-led social justice organization, and we've actually been working on a lot of women's history pieces that we're sending out and just kind of highlighting especially our Black women leaders in the group. And I have a portrait that I'll be sharing of both a Black historical figure and somebody in our group that I had the pleasure to make a portrait of. So, yeah.
Thank you, Zelda. Abby, if you'd like to tell us who you are and a little bit about you.
Hi, I'm Abby Burkle. I'm a 7th grader at Monticello Middle School. I also like to do art. I have a sketch that I'm going to share that really speaks feminism to me. So
Thank you, Abby. Malia.
Hello, my name is Malia. In this role, I am a member of the school board and the parent of 2 children who graduated from Heights High in 2019 and are figuring out how to be college students in the time of COVID. I don't envy them or you as current, K-12 students. This is weird and difficult. And I don't know that I, as a younger person would have been able to figure all this out. So kudos to all of you for being as resilient and flexible and persistent as you are. You're looking at me, you may not know it, but you may. I'm wearing my Moms of Black Boys t-shirt because I was trying to find something appropriate for today. Because my children are African American. We adopted them as newborns. And I guess it's just to show up that you don't necessarily know somebody's whole story just by looking at them when you meet a new person. And I present one way. You may know some things about me, but there's a whole lot you don't know. And I try to take that approach in everything I do. And I want other people to learn to not prejudge and preconceive somebody. Ask.
Thank you, Malia. State Senator Sandra Williams, if you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you that you think we should know.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here this morning. It is my pleasure to be here. I'm Sandra Williams. I represent the 21st Senate District of the state of Ohio, which is most of the city of Cleveland, Cleveland Heights, University Heights, Shaker Heights, Garfield Heights, and Newburgh Heights, about 365,000 people. I have been in the legislature for now, this is my 15th year, and it's been a pleasure to work on education issues, women's issues, small business issues, and other things that are important to our district. One small thing people might not know about me based on my position in the legislature is that I'm the only African-American woman in the Ohio Senate in 2021. So those are some things that we need to work on, and maybe Abby or Zelda can also join us in the legislature one day. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much for joining us. So State Rep Janine Boyd, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. So excited to learn more about Zelda and Abby. I'm just so proud of them already, and really honored to be on a panel with them. My goodness. And thank you, VP Saren, for putting this together. And those were very kind words. I was very humbled by them at the beginning. So I am an elected member of the Ohio House of Representatives. I'm going into, this is my final term in the House, actually. We have term limits in the state of Ohio. So I've been there 6 years. I have had the privilege of being mentored many days by Senator Williams, who I consider family. And my mom served in the legislature actually as well for 16 years in this seat. And she was also a former president of City Council in Cleveland Heights. And she was the first Black woman on council in Cleveland Heights and elected president of council in Cleveland Heights. So I have always felt that I had the spirit and the obligation as well to continue her legacy of committed and sincere public service and leadership. And so I'm really grateful that I've had the opportunity to do that. I'm a co-founder of our Ohio's first Black Maternal Health Caucus. I do a lot of policy work around Black maternal health. Ohio is behind the majority of states in our country, unfortunately, when it comes to Black maternal health and infant mortality as well. So that's one of my big issues in terms of women. And additionally, I would just add that I'm working on a very comprehensive domestic violence bill. Is something that's very, it's become a very large priority for me in the legislature. So I am around incredible women all the time, whether they be colleagues, mentors, or young people that I get to meet like this. So I'm just very grateful. And I look forward to the panel this morning. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I noticed that Superintendent Liz Kirby has joined the meeting as well. Liz, if you wanted to, we are currently live streaming. If you wanted to join us and introduce yourself and say hi.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Liz Kirby. I'm the superintendent of the Cleveland Heights University High School District. I have been in this role for 2 years, and I've been in education for a little over 25 years. So I'm very excited to join the conversation this morning. Leadership as a woman brings its opportunities, and it certainly brings its challenges. And I think across all of our different sectors, we can reflect on that. So I'm really excited to be able to engage with the panel and the students this morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. All right, well, I guess we can just get started. If you'd like, I was planning on going in alphabetical order in the same way that we did at the last event, and I realized that we've got an A name and a Z name. So Abby, if you don't mind, would you be willing to share your art and tell us a bit about what it means to you and why it's important to you?
Yeah. Can you hear me clearly? I got a text that said I was muffled, so.
I think you
Okay.
were a little bit low on volume, but we can hear you. We can hear your words. So feel free to share your screen if you'd like.
Okay. Hold on. So this is my artwork. It's a sketch that I did. And it's supposed to show that any woman, any person can be a feminist. So there are different shades of skin tone on the arm. The cross is a pride flag. And then there's a darker shade all the way around to a lighter shade of pink. Just to show that anyone, anywhere, any gender, any sexuality, any skin tone, anybody can be a feminist, anybody can help fight for women's rights.
Wow, thank you so much. You know, that's something that we hear a lot about, sort of intersectionality and how everybody's struggle is everybody's struggle. And the struggle for equality and rights and dignity is sort of this universal thing that we all need to chip in on. I don't want to talk too much. If anybody else would like to respond, please do.
Abby, that's a very powerful statement you're making with your sketch. Can I ask a really silly question? How long do you think it took you to come up with the idea versus how long it took you to work on?
Well, I sketch really quickly, especially when I'm just doing like a basic sketch like that. It like when I was drawing, I just thought I wanted to do a feminist fist. So I thought of that, and then I thought I'll turn it into the cross, and then I thought of the colors because of intersectionality, like you said. And then I drew the fist and drew all the like basic, and then I colored until it was time for me to go to bed.
So it sounds like you were thinking as you were drawing, is that correct?
Yeah.
And there's something very powerful about doing something, making something, and how it allows you to think and process and express yourself all at the same time. And you can kind of like work on your ideas as you're working on the finished product.
Yeah.
It's a very, very strong visual statement. I love it.
It is
This
powerful.
is
Oh, I'm sorry, Senator, you go first. I'll
Okay.
hush.
I was going to say that your sketch is very powerful and it shows the diversity in the social justice movement. And it also speaks to the fact that no one race, no one gender can do it alone. And so I think you captured everything. You hit the nail on the head, because it wasn't until everybody, or the majority of the people within our country, started saying enough is enough. This cannot happen to any one group of people, whether it be gay, lesbian, African American, Asians. I think you captured that all in that one fist, even with the red fingernail polish. So thank you for doing that. And I'm gonna try to get a picture of that and then post it on my social media and just give you credit for doing such a wonderful job.
I can email you the picture of it.
I would love that if you'd email it to all of us. I would love that. I'm going to do the same thing. Abby, that was really beautiful and powerful. And I'm so grateful you share your art so openly, because I know it's a very personal thing, right? It's a part of you. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm just curious, and this question can be to everyone, but to begin with Abby, I'm so curious about what feminism means to you. If you had to describe feminism, I had the privilege of meeting Gloria Steinem, and I don't know if you know that name, but right, she's a very powerful figure in women's history, as being one of the co-founders of the women's movement and feminist movement. And I wonder, and so I've heard so much from folks of her generation, and then of course my generation, Senator Williams' generation, but it'd be really interesting for me and powerful for me to learn from you guys, from Abby and Zelda, what feminism means to you. Would you mind sharing?
Yeah. I feel like feminism, I think of feminism from more of a historical standpoint. So like how it all started, where girls were just, you sat at home, you learned how to cook and clean and take care of kids, and then you get married and take care of kids and clean and cook. And then women started realizing that's not how life should be. Yeah, women can still do that, but we should also have the same rights as men, because we're just a different gender. That doesn't mean we're anything different from you. We have the same mental capabilities, we have the same physical capabilities. And so they started fighting back. And I just feel like feminism is that feeling of wanting to fight back. And even if you do want to become a stay-at-home mom when you're an adult, that's okay. But others, they can do whatever they want. Anybody can seriously do whatever they want with their lives, because it's their life and they should live it how they want to live it.
Yeah, that's great. I want to highlight that Abby literally is living on my block. So we grew up in the same community. So like I really feel like we have a lot of the same interests and stuff. And so really it's such a loaded question. As a queer person, like in this world, like I definitely view it pretty heavily, just the thought of feminism, intersectionality. What's really important is like fighting against gatekeeping. We really need to make sure that everybody is included if they want to be part of the movement. And like I've grown up in a household with a brother and a father who are both avid feminists, and just seeing everybody working together and fighting against inequality and everything is so inspiring. And just yeah, like the word intersectionality really is the big part of it to me, and working with everybody else in the community to open their eyes to different struggles that everybody faces, and just raising our voices and doing things like this.
Another thing that stands out in feminism to me is Um, like Zelda said, my brother, he's very, very feminist. And I feel like feminism isn't just for women and for trans and for LGBTQ. It's for anybody who feels like they need to speak up about it. Like my brother has long hair and wears dresses and loves the color pink, and that's feminism. That's feminism. That's anything can be feminism if you want to speak up about it.
I think that's a really interesting point. The idea that we've created a system that constrains people
Mhm.
and, creates roles for people to play, whether or not they naturally fit into those roles. Um, that's not freedom. That's the opposite of freedom. And the idea of feminism as freedom, that's a really interesting concept to me. I want to thank you both for sort of creating that in my mind. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, that was really powerful. When I think of feminism, I think of human rights, just human rights. So it's very similar to even to what you all have said, but both of you, both of you are leaders. I don't know if you are aware of that. I just want you to know, hearing it from me, I'm telling you, you're both leaders. And I expect that we'll see you leading more and more as you develop your ideas and your direction. So I'll stop now. Stop talking.
I had a question, actually a question for all of you. The theme of this year's Women's History Month is valiant women of the vote refusing to be silenced. And the way that I took that, obviously it's a reference to the suffragist movement and the idea that women, of course, should have the right to vote in this country and anywhere else, frankly. But, in this country, that was a fight, that was a battle. It took a very long time. It took way too long. And, now that is women have the right to vote in this country, but that doesn't mean that women's voices are always respected or heard. I know in the State House in particular, the We Belong Here movement that took place because there were people down there who just didn't see women, and certainly Black women, as people who they expected to be at the State House. And so they didn't respect their role and their positions. And I'm wondering if all of you can maybe comment on how your voices are heard, in Cleveland Heights, in school, in your work, at the school board, all of these arenas where your voice should be heard. What's been your experience of that?
Well, I feel like CHUH is a very diverse community. So at Monticello, I know that just because of the color of your skin, because of your gender, because of your sexuality, you will not be overheard if you have something to say and you speak loud enough. I think, like, my friends and I were talking about this, like, Monty has this culture that's just a mix of everything. Everything in this entire world comes together and gets put into these minds, and I think that's amazing. I think I've been very, very fortunate to have a community that's this biodiverse.
Okay, I just want to interrupt and compliment that. I have never considered the idea of looking at humanity through a lens of biodiversity. And that makes so much sense. Every ecosystem is more resilient and stronger when there's real biodiversity. And so thank you for that, because I've never considered it that way, and that makes absolute sense. So sorry to interrupt. Please, anybody else, tell me about your voice being heard.
I love that concept of biodiversity too. I really think that that's why the work around equity, both not only in our district, but really across the nation, is going to be something that makes us all stronger, because it supports and ensures that kind of diversity for sure. From my perspective as a female leader, you know, in terms of superintendents nationally, there might be 44% of superintendents nationally are African American women. So it is definitely a field where there is not a lot of both racial or gender diversity in particular. And it definitely has been interesting leaving Chicago, where there was definitely a lot more female leadership in the education space, and coming to Ohio. I was surprised in going down to Columbus to see, you know, that lack of diversity on the legislative side. It was really interesting and a bit shocking for me. And that's why these kinds of spaces where we really talk about, you know, being in roles as women is really important, so that we can first of all, just build solidarity and build affinity, but also develop a solid understanding of why this kind of diversity is so important, and how we can support each other as well. There are not a lot of mentors out there necessarily for female superintendents, and African American female superintendents. So those are spaces that we have to seek and create ourselves, as women have done over time across multiple fields.
Well, this is Senator Williams. I will say this. First of all, thank you for bringing up the women's suffrage movement. I am on the committee at the Ohio State House to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. We were not able to celebrate this big achievement last year because of COVID, but I want everybody to know and consider participating in the event we're going to have in August of 2020 at the Ohio State House. We've asked young people across the state to submit photos. So those of you who are artists like Abby, feel free to submit something. It's the Ohio Women's Suffrage website. We're asking every person, women and men, to participate in this commemoration. And I just want people to remember that although we passed the 19th Amendment 100 years ago, it was over a 70-year campaign just for women to get the right to vote. And even after that 70-year campaign, African American women still didn't see that same equality. We still had Jim Crow laws placed against us and never really saw what we were intended to see throughout that campaign. As a matter of fact, African American women, even though they participated, they really weren't, people didn't want them included in a lot of the things that were taking place during that movement. But I can say that we've made it, and our votes are still very important, even though sometimes, you know, there are obstacles put up to try to keep us away from the voting polls, like in the Ohio legislature or Georgia, for example. But I will say this, as a female in the Ohio legislature, politics is a very male-dominated field. And sometimes when you come to the table, your voice is ignored. You may make a comment and people will act as if you hadn't said anything. You will make a suggestion that is really good, and you know it's good because you've done all your homework, and they will just sit there and ignore you and go to the next person. And then a male will say the exact same thing right after you, and they will say, you know, that's a great idea. That's a great idea, and accept it and move on. So we still have a lot of obstacles to overcome in the legislature. And sometimes you still get this from women. Sometimes women can treat women some type of way as well. So it's not just about men, it's about how women look at and view women in leadership positions as well. And then finally, I'll say this, even in 2021, when we know, I think it was Zelda maybe, who said that, you know, we can do anything. We have the same brain, we have the same mind, we can do anything. And I'll tell you, I'm considering putting in for a new position in the city of Cleveland. And most of the people that I've talked to in the city of Cleveland, who are the people you have to go to in order to get this particular job, are all men. And the questions that I'm getting are, do you know this is a 24-hour job? Like, you know, you can't go home early. Don't you have a family? Don't you realize that you can't just not show up? And yes, I do know that. I've done my homework. Secondly, a very powerful man said, is there another job that I can find you? Are you sure this is the right fit? You know, there was a woman in this job before, and you should talk to her because I'm not sure if this is the right fit for you. Let me help you find something else to do. So I can go on and on with the comments that I've received about this new position that I am going to apply for. But I just want you to know that it never stops. And once we achieve something, it doesn't mean, okay, we can let down our guards, because it will always exist. I think it will exist until all women are in control of everything. But that was a good question, BP. Thank you.
Well, I'll just continue the theme of the State House for a moment. And thank you, VP Saren, for bringing up We Belong Here, which is a really incredible creation that my colleague and sister in the State House, our minority leader, Sykes, Amelia Sykes, created because of our experiences at the State House as Black women and women of color. And she personally had a really awful experience in which, so at the State House, you know, we have security, certainly as elected folks, we do try to, you know, have some security around, as you all have seen in the news over the past year. And just as recently as January, there's quite a bit of unrest among some of our neighbors in the state and in the country, right? We've seen quite an increase in racism and acts of racism, more so. So we do have highway state patrolmen and women on the grounds, and we have what are called sergeants at arms. And so we go through a sort of like at the airport, like we go through a screening to get into the building and certain parts of buildings. So you go through a metal detector, and there's a conveyor belt for bags, et cetera, with a camera to review what's in the bags. And the folks, security standing there to wave wands if necessary and check bags. So for the most part, everyone knows us as legislators. Those of us who are elected to those seats, they know who we are. And we typically don't have much trouble. And some of us have longstanding relationships with those members of security as well. So they know us, you know, from our parents who may have served, or I used to lobby at the State House as well. Before I became an elected person, I was a lobbyist for children with special needs and mental health disorders. So I would be at the State House as an advocate, child advocate and lobbyist. And so some of us, you know, have relationships and they've known us a long time. But some, you know, are newer and they come in and they don't know them. And nevertheless, after a year or two, you expect that they know who you are. And there's so few, as Superintendent Kirby mentioned, there are so few of us of color, so few Black women in the state legislature that certainly you know us when we walk through the doors. But one particular member of security treated our minority leader with complete disregard and told her that she didn't look like a legislator, which is probably one of the most blatantly disrespectful and racist things someone could say to us, or one of us who drives, an hour, 2 hours, 2.5 hours each way to get to the State House to do the business of the people that elected us to be there. And deal with the policies that we have to deal with, quite a few of which are also the height of disrespect and racist because of their content. So We Belong Here came out of that experience. And so she has used it to really encourage and inspire young women, especially Black women, to run for office, because the more, as Senator Williams said, the more women enter into policy and politics, the more the policy and the politics will help women. And by helping women, you help everyone. And that's a truth. So the State House is a very, just to add to what the senator said, and to also sort of re-say what all of you have kind of said, I have the privilege of serving so my office, my district is House District 9. It is within the Senate District 21 that Senator Williams represents. So she is our senator, my senator. My House district is Cleveland Heights, University Heights, Shaker Heights, and I share parts of wards 2 and 4 of Cleveland with another sister in the State House, State Rep Stephanie House. And it would be really hard for me to do this job if I didn't have this home to come back to, if I didn't have Cleveland Heights, University Heights, Shaker Heights as my district to come home to, where there is this biodiversity, where there is this valuing of that, where there is this interest of young people, older people, every people to practice neighborliness or civility, or to work together to counter social injustices, or protect animals, or protect the environment, whatever it is we're talking about in Cleveland Heights today. It would be it would be 3 times as hard to do this job if I didn't have this place to represent and to come home to. The state legislature is it can be a very hard place. It can be a heartbreaking place. But we do good work, I would say. Senator Williams and I have been I'm very fortunate to have her as a senator. We are. And she and I have been able to fight side by side on issues like school funding for Cleveland Heights, University Heights schools, Shaker schools. We've been able to fight side by side for women's rights to make their own healthcare choices. I'm very fortunate to have this district and to have that sort of camaraderie in the legislature, because it is a hard place. So I'll go on mute now.
All right. I didn't want to forget about Zelda. Zelda, I know earlier you mentioned that you had some artwork that you wanted to share as well, and I'm interested in seeing it. I know everybody is, and want to hear sort of what it means to you and how it relates to this conversation.
Yeah, so actually earlier in February, I made a portrait of Ella Baker for Black History Month, and I also thought that it was completely applicable to Women's History Month. So here it is. I worked with a collage medium and painting to create this portrait, and I think just in general, highlighting Black women in history is so important. Black women and Black trans women have created so much of the gay and civil rights movements in history and are continuing to do so. And actually, I have another portrait that I made very recently for specifically Women's History Month of my friend Tati. So I don't even know if she'll see this, but I just wanted to show it here as well, highlighting another Black woman who's working in the Heights to create an impact and fight for social justice in our community. And she inspires me so much, like getting involved in Safer Heights and working in the community has been so great, but also seeing her as a leader inspires me. And also like the other woman in Safer Heights, Kalia, also is so inspiring, and both seeing them and wanting to work alongside them and then go off to college and create my own kind of social justice organization or community is so inspiring. And I think that it'll be such a great opportunity in my future.
Can I ask Zelda? First of all, I want to say that those are beautiful portraits. So my compliments. And I think the sentiment and the thought behind it is illuminating as well. I've had conversation with Tati about Safer Heights and creating a safer Cleveland Heights for everyone in a more inclusive way. And I see exactly what you're talking about, the benefit of this sort of combined experience that, we collect and we push forward, and it's back to the intersectionality of it, where everybody's experience needs to be considered in order to create a good experience for everybody. You can't dismiss people's experience and expect that you're going to create a better society for everyone. So I want to thank you for that. I wanted to sort of get your read on how those movements, because I've heard a lot about and I've read a lot about how movements for social justice can sometimes be environments for women or for non-cis het men, basically, that are dangerous, dismissive, even in those social justice movements. And thinking about how women's voices are heard, how young women's voices are heard in those spaces. I don't know what your experience of that has been, or whether Cleveland Heights has created a movement that is more inclusive than that.
Yeah, like just in general, like Marsha P. Johnson starting like the riots for the gay civil rights movement is like so inspiring. We see such activism still today that follows through that. And then Ella Baker working for integration of schools and equality for Black kids in education. Literally, we see it because we have a Black woman superintendent like on this call, and we see how that has like how all of like Ella Baker's work and so many other people in history have worked to make this possible for Black women in education and for like every student at Heights High and in all of the other schools. Just it's so fascinating. And I think making portraits, which is one of my favorite art forms, just to highlight like so many people, is great to just kind of both show their background story and then also incorporate my touches of like, I wanted to call back to how Abby was thinking in the moment of creating her art, and I do I do the same thing. I'm always starting with a very vague idea almost, and then like most of the time it comes out completely different, and I'm always super proud of it. But and I think that actually really is reflected in the actual movements that we see today, is things just keep developing and we find different paths and gain more attention even in the public. And I think that art in this form and movements for equality are always developing and changing.
Vice President Khalil, can I just say that, Zelda, I love the work. The portraits are just beautiful. And I just want to commend artists like you and those in the documentary, the film industry, because it's artists like you and the work that you do that piques another person's interest to learn more about the person that's in your portrait. Like you would go and look and see, okay, what else did Ella Baker do? What else did this other person do? And when you start telling those stories through art or through film. It's a great way to educate people who might not pick up a book. People read sometimes, but they'll look at a portrait, they'll look at a movie or a documentary, and you can learn so much. So please keep doing the work that you're doing. And I want to get pictures of your work too, so that we can showcase you guys on our social media.
Ditto. Though your work is very beautiful, and I love how you use different materials. It's just, I don't know how you all, I think artists are incredible. So you all are just what assets you are to the community to tell stories in these forms. You know, we're really fortunate to have you. So I can't wait to show you off too, to make sure you send them to us.
I also really appreciate your knowledge of the historical context of these movements. And you mentioned people whose names a lot of folks do not know. And often when we talk about big social change, there are a lot of people doing a lot of work who, you know, as history unfolds, don't necessarily get that recognition. And it's not anything that anyone necessarily seeks, but I appreciate you really incorporating that and having that to inform your artwork as well. You know, we're really right now in another historical moment, you know, the pandemic, COVID-19. I was listening to a program recently about the fight for minimum wage in particular, and some demographics that were shared that women in particular, women of color in particular, really have been the most impacted by the pandemic. But not only that, this fight for minimum wage really has the potential to have a very big impact on them. And so it just reminds me that, you know, the struggle really continues, which is why I'm so encouraged that we have young people really still grounded in this work, knowledgeable about the work, committed to the work, because we're going to need to continue to fight and struggle. And justice is never easy. It really is a fight. So not necessarily a physical fight, but it's definitely a struggle. So that's why it's so important for us to come together, to hear this information, to get inspired, to inspire each other, and to keep pushing forward. I mean, Safer Heights to me is a perfect example of our goal in the district in terms of what we want to see in graduates. So graduates that are critical thinkers, who are active citizens, who are thoughtful, who have an active role in the world. Like, that's so powerful. We want to create more students, you know, support more students towards that type of work across, you know, multiple, you know, fields in particular. We need it. You know, if I link back to not only do we need the diversity, we also need that activism too. And that's the great thing about the Cleveland Heights community in particular, is it's just a bed of activism. And a lot of great folks and great people have their origins in Cleveland Heights too, in particular.
All right, I'd like to one. I think Abby would like to share something, but before we get there, I did want to ask Malia, if you, or Board Member Lewis, if you'd like to comment, if you'd like to talk about your experience of making sure that your voice is heard here in Cleveland Heights, University Heights, but also, you know, something else that occurred to me. I know some of the work that you do outside of the school board reminds me a bit of growing up. One of my godparents was someone who was instrumental in Chicago Women in Trades, and you know, worked on, you know, back in the 80s, you know, getting women into the trades. And this has not always been an easy, I'm sure it's still not an easy task. And I know some of the work you do, you know, is sort of, you know, adjacent to that at least, and sort of what has your experience been sort of both on school board and off of school board, making sure that your voice is heard, that you have a seat at the table, and that, you know, the space is created for you?
Thank you, Khalil. You know, it took me 50 years to get to the point where these two young people are as teenagers. to get to the point where I felt confident that my voice and my opinions and my thoughts mattered, not just to myself, but to the world at large. And the fact that the two of you, Abby and Zelda, already have that level of assuredness, intellectual rigor, and sense that you do matter is just extraordinary to me. My youth was shaped by being told that my opinion didn't matter for a long time, that my specific voice wasn't important. And so I had to learn to channel my thoughts and my political activism in different ways. And it went from, no, what you say doesn't matter, we're not going to listen to you, to I have to put my body on the line because my words aren't heard. So I need to be visible at demonstrations. ACT UP in San Francisco in the late 80s, early 90s was a complicated place. But there was a time in this country where people needed to put their bodies on the line for that specific cause, the same way, the past year or two, we have been putting our bodies on the line for the Black Lives Matter cause. There are times in history where words aren't enough, and you have to actually put your physical self out there. And then I went through a phase of learning that my written words could have impact. And I learned to think with a pencil in my hand. And so speaking extemporaneously is much harder for me. I need that time of thinking with a pencil in my hand. That's why I was asking you, Abby, about your art process, because I find that I can crystallize my ideas as I try to write them down. And it gives me time to process and get it right or get it better. And then I was asked to consider running for school board a few times, but I wasn't in a place in my family life where I could do that because, well, kiddos come first. That's just the way it works. And when you have kiddos of your own, then, oh my God, they take first place, right? Janine knows. But frankly, after Donald Trump was elected, I decided that if I didn't do it right now, I was never going to do it. And this was the time when I had to, again, put myself out there in a new and different way to make change happen in a way that I could and in a limited scope where I thought I could have a positive impact on my world. And school board is a place where I can do the work, be an advocate, say the words out loud to help people right here in my community, and I can see that impact. And really, it's about making sure that we don't, as I said at the very beginning, that we don't make assumptions, that we take into account everybody's point of view, and that all children are included, accounted for, provided for. And in our district, what we try so hard to do is make sure that each child gets what that child needs, and it's not the same. And we can't assume, right? Assumptions. We can't assume that this is good for 80% of the kids and therefore it's good enough for everybody. It's like, what about those other 20%? Right? Or this is good enough for 60% of the kids and, oh, damn, those 40%, we don't care. And what I have learned in my time on the school board is that philosophy, ideals, activism, all those things are incredibly important, but then we are hamstrung by law. And the state tells us what we can and cannot do. The federal government tells us what we can and cannot do. And yet, we still have to do what we think is right within those constraints. And the constraints are awful. Just ask Superintendent Kirby. She has to deal with the nitty-gritty every single day. But as a representative of this community, I have a responsibility to push against those constraints every chance I get and make sure that we don't forget that our responsibility is to every single child. And not a single one is the same as any other. And as a society, we like to put people into little categories because it makes it easier to think about. And then we don't have to stretch our little minds to do something that's difficult or uncomfortable. And that's precisely what we have to do, is to constantly stretch our little minds and make ourselves uncomfortable and not forget the person who isn't sitting at the table. So I come to the table with all the various categories that I can provide, and yet I have to make sure I remember the person who's not at the table. Now back to construction and trades and places where women historically have not been welcome or expected or allowed. One of my many other hats as a landlord involves fixing houses, providing safe and decent housing for people right here in the community, and doing an awful lot of very dirty and potentially dangerous work, but not really if you think about it before you start. In order, again, it's about having an effect right here on the part of the world that I can have an effect on. And so if I can fix a house, if I can rewire a kitchen, if I can, deal with disgusting plumbing messes and make this house better for the people who are living right here, right now, then that has a long-term impact. We know that housing insecurity is a massive issue in Cuyahoga County. The quality of housing around us is absolutely terrible for a long list of historical reasons. And frankly, most adults, most people who are 40 and younger don't know the first thing about how to fix anything, because our education system devalued trades, devalued working with your hands, devalued things that got you dirty. Starting in the late 70s, early 80s, we no longer taught kids shop class. We no longer taught kids how to sew a button on. We no longer taught kids how to replace the washers in their kitchen faucet. Things that are boring and may or may not lead you to a life of sewing or plumbing or whatever, but that are useful and practical skills for everyday life. So as a society, we said, only mind work is valuable. Body work is not valuable. Body work isn't considered worthy. It's for those other people. And if you are capable of mind work, then that's what you do. You go to college, you get a job that involves sitting behind a desk. And therefore we have all these people who don't know how to do anything, really. Not to degrade people who are younger than me, but there's this, there's a cultural thing, and we need to change that. And in CAH, we have been trying very hard for the last 10 years to bring back, to strengthen, to encourage students to try out career and technical education paths, different programs, because you might like it, or you might learn something by accident that's useful to you later, or you might find the passion of your life that provides you with the job and the ability to support yourself once you finished high school, and we've had this mutual exclusion mentality, either you go to college or you go to trade school. And the fact is that it's not mutually exclusive. You can do both. I have a degree in English literature, but I know how to wield a hammer. And that's okay. And I want that to be okay for all of our students. You can do whatever it is you want, and you can mix and match different things. And it would be really good if you didn't feel flustered and at a loss when something breaks and you don't know how to do it yourself, or you don't have the money to pay someone else to do it. Because so much of what we spend our money on is because we don't have either the self-confidence to try it ourselves, or the ability to figure it out, or the desire to get our hands dirty. And, if you're an artist, you know that getting your hands dirty is most of the fun, right? So anyway, that's sort of a bit of a roundabout way of trying to connect all those different points.
Well, I'll say, that leads me right back to something Abby was talking about earlier, which is sort of this feminism as freedom. You can be what you want. You are not constrained. You shouldn't be constrained by society's expectations of you because of your race, your gender, so on and so forth. I know we're at around 11 o'clock, and I value everybody's time. I did want to ask Abby to share. She mentioned she wanted to share something a little earlier in the chat, and so I wanted to give you the opportunity to share that and provide everybody the opportunity for some final thoughts before we close. So Abby, please.
Okay, so this is a poem. I'm not that good at poetry, so I had to write this poem for class. And it wasn't the poem that interested me. It was the response I got in class from one of my male peers. So I'm going to read you the poem, and then I'm going to explain to you what they responded with. The poem's called What is a Lady? I am tired of this makeup cover-up. We hide our scars behind the stars like CoverGirl and Vogue. Girls are expected to be pretty, not witty, and when we show our faces, you call us disgraces. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm insecure and wear makeup as a thought to cure. What society has told me is disgusting, and as we know, some men stand with us, 'cause united we stand. But there are no other options. We fight back. Forget being modest, forget your manners, and fight back against our enemies. You should be more like a lady. Well, ladies, this is a lady. And so I read that poem in class, and a male peer basically read a poem that said, not all men. And I hate that phrase so much because, yeah, we know it's not all men. We know that not every man is going to abuse you emotionally or physically or harass you. But there are some men that do, and there are some men in society that do. And we understand that there are some people that are good people, but then there are also people who are bad people. And just because you don't feel like it's like you wouldn't do that, that's everybody, every woman has to go through that at some point. So we understand it's not all men, but some men do it. So I feel like not all men is a phrase that has to be stopped.
Wow. Couple things. One, first of all, you are a poet. That was outstanding. And so if you think that you are not good at writing poetry, you are incorrect about that. I applaud you. And second of all, men get defensive. I know I'm subject to it as well. I get defensive even when I shouldn't, certainly. But not all men is a phrase that nobody needs to say ever again. Yeah, we know that there's diversity in the outlooks of men as well. It doesn't need to be spoken in defense every single time we reflect on the reality of a society that creates a gendered hierarchy.
Mhm.
And so thank you for that. I hopefully that young man grows out of needing to say that.
Mhm.
I don't want to speak too much, but thank you for sharing that poem with us. I thought that was really great.
That was more than great, Abby. That was incredible, really. And you don't ever say you're not a poet. And I think when you and Zelda identify as artists, that covers everything. You can do anything, whatever you're moved to do, to express and speak to an issue or to bring beauty, whatever it is, whatever your medium, it doesn't matter. You're just artists. And that's a gift to all of us, really. That was incredible. And it's kind of like saying all lives matter, isn't it? When you hear not all men. It's kind of like also hearing all lives matter. It's very similar, isn't it? You know, people get scared that they're going to be left out of something or they're going to be included in the wrong thing. And it's instead of focusing on the issue, right? And that happens everywhere. So you all are really on, I'm just so impressed and so proud and encouraged. You all have really encouraged me today. Zelda and Abby, thank you so much for that. I know that wasn't your mission, but you have thoroughly encouraged me and I'm grateful for it.
Okay, so if we could go through, if anybody has any final thoughts to share with us, with the community, I'm interested to hear it.
If I may, what comes through to me in Abby's poem and in both Abby and Zelda's visual work is the amount of thought that went into it. And it's that thinking and then the ability to express those thoughts that is what makes your work so moving. So never stop thinking and never stop figuring out how to express those thoughts. It's just incredible. Thank you very much.
I think my final words is first, thank you for providing the space for all of us this morning to come together and share some reflection of Women's History Month. This type of dialogue is really important, but also the individual conversations that all of us have with our peers, in our fields, in our families, with strangers around feminism and issues of women's history are really important. You know, when we think of movements happen in big ways, but they also happen in small ways too. And so, you know, reading a poem and then engaging with a peer in a dialogue about what it represents and their interpretation of that, all those pieces are really, really important. So I just want to encourage everyone, but especially our students, to continue to have those conversations, but also to know that you have a community of people, men and women, who are supporting you and who also see this as important as well. So thank you for the opportunity and thank you all for sharing.
Well, this is Senator Williams. I too want to thank you for having me, Vice President Coolio, on this program. This was so enlightening and educational for me to hear how young people are thinking today. And if we were ever worried about who's coming behind us, the next generation, we should no longer be worried. So kudos to Abby and Zelda for just sharing your thoughts with us and your art. And I want to also say kudos to the Cleveland Heights University Heights School District, because you all are producing some very intelligent and valuable minds that will take over the world. So thank you for this platform and continue to do all the great things you are doing for not only Cleveland Heights, but for the country in general and this state.
So we're closing out. So I just thank you. I don't thank you, Vice President Sarin, for having us, for convening us, for celebrating women's history with us, and giving us this incredible opportunity to meet Abby and Zelda and experience their art in its different forms and the power of their art. And I just would reiterate what everyone else has said. And what I said earlier is that I'm encouraged. I know you all are on leadership paths, wherever those leadership paths may lead, whether it's elected leadership or not, it doesn't matter. And I just know that we'll see the fruits of your work, because it's impossible you have lights that shine so brightly already, like they're just going to grow, you know. And Senator Williams knows I'm a like mushhead, and I could start crying right now. Like I just feel really, that was just such a powerful, I'm just really so encouraged and grateful that you all are, that I get to share this time and space and in the universe with you, because you make it a better place already. So thank you guys so much for what you're doing already, just being students and being honest and being open. Thank you. And thank you, Superintendent Kirby, for fighting for your school district as hard as you do. I'm grateful to be able to do that with you as well. And Malia, thank you.
All right, I guess with that, we can end it there. And I want to thank each and every one of you for joining me today, for accepting this invitation, and for helping me personally with your insight and input, and helping the community as well with that same insight and input and experience. You know, refusing to be silenced is, you know, like Audre Lorde said, your silence will not protect you. We stand up, we find common cause, and we push forward. We progress toward equality and toward justice. And we've still got work to do, you know. Violence Against Women Act, you know, just moving forward, and Aisha's Law, the Equal Rights Amendment. We've still got a lot of work to do, and I commend and encourage Abby and Zelda for, I know, pushing us toward the next struggle that maybe some of us older people aren't even aware is coming down the line, but the next struggle for equality. We'll be on board, and we're grateful that you're on board too. So I want to thank everybody for joining us this morning. And with that, we can end. All right. Everybody have a wonderful day.
Oh,
Great
the
day.
work continues. Thank you.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
All right.
Bye.